Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be taking a closer look at the Knights Templar today.
A fascinating group.
Yeah, we've got a ton of different sources to dig into, historical accounts, some more modern takes on them, even some looks into how they organize themselves. I think people might be surprised at just how relevant the Templars still are.
Oh, absolutely. Their story is so intertwined with everything from the Crusades to, believe it or not, modern banking.
So, where do we even begin with a group like this? Who exactly were the Knights Templar?
Well, let's set the scene, right? It's the 12th century. The First Crusade has just wrapped up. Jerusalem is in Christian hands.
Yeah.
And all these pilgrims are heading to the Holy Land. But the thing is, the journey, super dangerous.
So not exactly a peaceful pilgrimage, then.
Oh, yeah. Bandits, political instability, the whole 9 yards. It was a risky trip. And that's where our knights come in. Hugues de Payan, French knight, saw the need for some serious protection, you know. So he proposes this new military order totally focused on keeping those pilgrims safe. And that's how the Knights Templar were born.
That's wild. They started with just 9 knights, right?
Just 9.
It's crazy to think they became as powerful as they did.
Oh, but they gained traction fast, especially after the Council of Troyes in 1129. They get official backing from the Catholic Church, thanks in part to some big names like Bernard of Clairvaux, who was a pretty influential guy. And that was huge, like massive donations started pouring in. They got land, tons of recruits. It's like their white mantles with that red cross, instant symbol of power, piety, the whole package.
And their name, Knights Templar, that comes from their headquarters, right? On the Temple Mount.
Bingo. Based right there in Jerusalem, believed to be the site of Solomon's temple, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, Knights Templar definitely rolls off the tongue a little easier.
For sure. All right, so now we've got these warrior monks, backed by the church, hanging out at one of the most important sites in Christianity. What happens next?
Well, they definitely lived up to the warrior part, that's for sure. Fierce fighters in the Crusades. But here's where things get interesting, their involvement in. Wait for it.
Finance,
like banking.
Banking. These guys weren't just about fighting. They were managing huge estates, involved in trade, even acting as lenders. Think about it. Those pilgrims needed a way to carry money safely. So the Templars, they come up with this system, right? Pilgrims could deposit money in Europe and then withdraw it in the Holy Land. No more getting robbed on the road.
It's like an early version of traveler's checks, or even international banking.
Exactly. It was revolutionary, completely changed the game. And that system built on trust and a network of Templar houses. It paved the way for so much of what we see in banking today. Letters of credit, you name it. Some scholars even say they had a hand in early checking accounts.
Wow. So the Knights Templar, warrior monks, helped shape how we bank today. Crazy.
It's pretty wild, huh? Speaks to their innovation, their ability to adapt.
Yeah.
But like any good story, theirs has some twists and turns. All that secrecy they relied on for those financial transactions. It led to suspicion, rumors, and ultimately their downfall, right? All those whispers about secret ceremonies, hidden treasures, even maybe the Ark of the Covenant. Now, that's something I definitely want to hear more about.
Well, the Ark connection, that's mostly speculation and legend. Their headquarters were on the Temple Mount, which is where tradition says the Ark was kept, right? So that, plus rumors that the Templars were digging around under the Temple Mount, well, you can see how people made the connection.
So no hard proof, just a good old-fashioned mystery. Did they even find anything down there?
We do have records of them excavating, but the exact purpose is still a big question mark. Maybe they were after relics, ancient scrolls. Who knows? But it's those unanswered questions that keep us coming back to the Templar story, you know. And the Ark, well, that's such a powerful symbol. No wonder people keep weaving it into the narrative.
Definitely makes you wonder what else might be hidden in their history.
Exactly. But as we'll see, even without the Ark, the Templars led pretty incredible lives, full of adventure, intrigue, and yeah, tragedy too. Their financial power, the mysteries, their fall from grace, all of that makes their story just as fascinating today as it was centuries ago.
So we've got their rise as these warrior monks, their foray into early banking,
Yeah.
and then all those secrets and whispers. What ultimately led to their downfall? Where does Friday the 13th come into all of this? Something tells me things are about to get a little ominous.
Well, Friday the 13th, it takes on a whole new meaning when you're talking about the Knights Templar. It's 1307, we've got King Philip V of France, and get this, he's in serious debt to the Templars. But he thinks he's got a better solution than actually paying them back.
Uh-oh, this can't be good.
You got it. Philip, he's all about consolidating power, getting rid of those debts, so what does he do? He sees those rumors swirling around the Templars, you know the ones, and thinks, jackpot. Heresy, blasphemy, secret rituals, the whole shebang. It was the perfect excuse to take them down.
So basically, he weaponized all the mystery surrounding them.
Exactly. And on Friday, October 13th, 1307, I mean, talk about a bad omen, he orders the mass arrest of all the Templars in France. It was brutal, no other way to put it. Arrests, torture, forced confessions, executions, you name it.
That's dark. What about the Templars in other parts of Europe? What happened to them?
It really depended. Some were arrested, put on trial, but not many were actually found guilty.
Okay.
Others managed to find refuge in different orders, like the Knights Hospitaller. But the Pope, with Philip breathing down his neck, well, he officially dissolved the Templar Order in 1312.
So after centuries of power and influence, the Knights Templar were just gone. Poof, just like that.
Well, not quite. I mean, their impact is still felt today in a lot of ways. One of the most obvious legacies they left behind is architectural. You look across Europe, the Middle East even, and you can see remnants of the Templars everywhere, imposing castles, those churches built like fortresses, even entire villages that bear their name.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of pictures those grand stone castles when they think of medieval knights.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the Templars. They were master builders, some of the most impressive fortifications of their time, like Chateau Pellerin in the Holy Land. Strategically brilliant, held up against multiple sieges. And back in Europe, they were building churches, these commanderies, basically administrative centers, but they were economic hubs too, like almost an early form of international business headquarters, if you think about it.
That's interesting. It makes you wonder, were their architectural innovations as impactful as their financial systems? Did they come up with any new building techniques or anything like that?
You know, that's a great point, and one that often gets overlooked. They were early adopters of Gothic architecture, and
Yeah.
that style, it spread like wildfire across Europe. Their commanderies, they often incorporated things like vaulted ceilings, pointed arches, all those hallmarks of the Gothic style that allowed for much larger, more elaborate buildings. And remember, those commanderies, they weren't just buildings, they were all part of this massive network, right? Facilitating trade, communication, you name it, all across Christendom.
Wow, their impact on the medieval world is just, it's kind of mind-blowing. Like they were ahead of their time in so many ways.
Oh, for sure. They were definitely forward thinkers. And speaking of impact, we can't forget about the myths, the legends that have sprung up around them. The Templars, they've almost become mythical figures themselves, all wrapped up in secrecy, rumors, lost treasures, secret societies, the Holy Grail, the whole nine yards. It's all incredibly captivating.
I know, it's like they're the perfect characters for some kind of historical thriller.
Exactly. And that's why they pop up everywhere. Books, movies, video games, you name it. They're heroes, they're villains, they're guardians of ancient knowledge, seekers of lost treasures. They really capture the imagination, you know?
Do any modern groups actually have ties to the original Templars, though? Like, is there any truth to those claims of secret societies carrying on their traditions?
Ah, now that's where things get a little tricky. You've got groups like certain Masonic orders who say they're connected to the Templars. But when you look for hard evidence of a direct link, it's just not there. It's more about shared ideals, symbolism, things like that, rather than an actual verifiable lineage.
So more of an inspirational connection than a genealogical one.
Exactly. And it's important to keep in mind the Templar order was officially disbanded by the Pope. The idea that a direct line of succession could survive something like that, pretty unlikely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Still, it's pretty interesting how their legacy continues in these groups, even if it's more about values than actual descent.
Absolutely. I think it speaks to the enduring power of their story. You know, it still
Yeah.
resonates with people centuries later. But beyond all the myths and the intrigue, what can we actually learn from the Knights Templar, from their successes and their failures?
That's a great question. I mean, their story seems like kind of a cautionary tale about unchecked power, maybe, and how important transparency really is. They achieved some amazing things, but in the end, all that secrecy, their insistence on being independent, it made them vulnerable to people who wanted to exploit that.
That's a really good point. I mean, the Templars, they were incredibly powerful, both from a military perspective and financially. But that power, combined with all the secrecy, it made them a target. I think their story really highlights the importance of balance, you know, between power and accountability, between keeping things quiet and being open and transparent.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even the groups with the best intentions, they can still be corrupted. And being transparent, especially for organizations that have a lot of influence, it's crucial.
Absolutely. So when we look back at the Knights Templar, we see more than just warriors. We see innovators, builders, and yeah, a cautionary tale about the complexities of power. And their story, full of both triumphs and tragedies, it continues to captivate us all these centuries later.
So we've covered their rise and fall, their impact on architecture, finance, those mysteries that still surround them. But before we wrap up, are there any other interesting parts of their story, maybe some lesser-known things that we haven't touched on? It's crazy how, even after all that, there's still so much we don't know about the Knights Templar. Like, what other little-known facts or forgotten gems are hidden in their history?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is their code of conduct. I mean, these were warrior monks, right? They had some pretty strict
Yeah,
rules.
I can imagine. What kind of things did their code cover?
Pretty much everything. It was called the Latin Rule, and it dictated their clothes, what they could eat, how they should behave in battle, even how they prayed. Discipline, humility, obedience, those were the big things. Imagine a knight being forbidden from wearing fancy clothes or gambling. Not exactly what you'd expect from a medieval knight, right?
Yeah, it's pretty big contrast. So it sounds like their values were just as important as their fighting skills.
Absolutely. And that commitment to their values, well, it really contributed to their reputation for integrity and trustworthiness, which helped them a lot, especially with all their financial dealings.
It makes you wonder if maybe some modern financial institutions could learn a thing or two from the Templars,
Yeah.
that focus on ethics and responsibility.
That's an interesting thought. And another thing people often forget about is their maritime influence. They had a whole fleet of ships, which was crucial for transporting pilgrims, goods, maybe even treasures.
Really? A navy? I never knew that.
Oh, yeah, they were pretty skilled sailors. Their naval power played a big part in their success, both economically and militarily.
So the Knights Templar, they were more than just warriors and bankers. They were disciplined monks, architects, sailors. It's incredible how many different facets there are to their story.
It really is, and I think that's a key takeaway here. The Templars, they don't fit neatly into any one box. Their story is a reminder to look beyond the surface, to challenge those assumptions and appreciate how complex history really is.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from their beginnings to their surprising role in modern banking, those myths and controversies that still surround them, even those lesser-known parts of their story. So as we wrap up our deep dive, what final thought would you leave our listeners with?
I think it's this. The Knights Templar, their triumphs and their failures both, they remind us that even the most powerful institutions, they're still subject to the tides of history. It makes you think about the impact of ambition, the allure of secrets, the importance of finding balance in that pursuit of power. And ultimately, what we choose to remember from the past, how we interpret it, that shapes how we understand the world around us today.
What an incredible journey this has been. From warrior monks to financial innovators, the Knights Templar have left their mark on history. Their story is a great reminder that the past isn't really gone, it's still echoing through the ages, giving us valuable lessons and sparking that endless curiosity. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Knights Templar.